gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? By Great 78.
Who gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? I seen those English dramas too. They're cruel. So if there's any other way to spell the word, it's fine with me. With me.
Chapter 14. Man in the Box. Draco. Friday, October 29th, 1999. Peckwater, Flat 307, Christchurch College, Oxford, England. The following day, both he and Granger were slow to rise, having lain awake in their own beds until the wee hours of the morning. Each of them had spent hours alone, turning over their late-night conversations in their minds. Draco knew that as a light sleeper, she had tossed and turned over her examination grades. His own private worries about the minister's meddling were compounded by his usual nightmares. When the time for classes came, she and Theo hurried out of the flat together, with Draco staying behind, claiming a headache. Somewhere near the end of his restless night, Draco had come to the conclusion that he couldn't exactly go off half-cocked, storming into Shacklebolt's office and demanding answers for this. Yes, the wizard was likely behind the grade-tampering subterfuge, but Draco needed proof, not just of Shacklebolt's part in fixing Granger's grades, but for all of it. The surveillance, the plan to keep her away from meaningful work within the wizarding world. Without tangible proof of the minister's plan, it was simply Draco's word against Shacklebolt's. If he had evidence that this plot was both real and entirely the brainchild of the Minister for Magic, perhaps Draco might not receive the full brunt of punishment when it all eventually got exposed, because, after turning it over in his mind all evening, he was certain now that this was Shacklebolt's backup plan. If the man could get what he wanted, namely Granger out of the picture, all the better for Shacklebolt. But if that proved impossible, and the minister's plot was exposed, Draco had no doubt that the idea and blame for the deceit would fall squarely upon his own shoulders, unless Draco had evidence to the contrary. Still, he dreaded revealing his part in any of this to anyone. His reputation and future were already generally fucked, and as a convicted criminal on probation, he would have a shorter fall from grace than the Minister for Magic if this was found out. But the idea of having to admit that he'd fallen into his old ways, sneaking around, plotting ill will against a Muggle-born witch, this Muggle-born witch, no less, it gnawed at him. He had no corroboration of what he and Shacklebolt had discussed, beyond the sanitized conversation they'd had in front of Percy Weasley several weeks before. There, Shacklebolt had been careful with his phrasing, leaving off mention of coercion, surveillance, and reporting back to him, whilst the minister had mentioned the idea that the young former Death Eater might find himself in prison, after all. Draco doubted very much that this weighed upon Percy Weasley's conscience at all. He was likely in the same mind as his brother, believing that Draco had cheated his way into freedom somehow. From an outsider's perspective, Shacklebolt might have only asked Draco to keep a protective eye on the wizarding world's favourite Muggle-born witch. Nothing sinister or clandestine, just safeguarding. Only Draco knew the truth. He resolved that his next course of action would be to run all of this by another person, someone familiar with everyone involved, and someone who had the ability to do something about the situation. This person also undoubtedly had Granger's best interests at heart. Still, Draco had no idea how his request for help would be received. It wasn't as though the two of them would ever call themselves friends. But his options were slim, and as much as he loathed the idea, Draco needed the help. Pym. There was a tiny pop, and his elf appeared, wearing a white polo shirt, and a pair of white shorts and holding a tiny tennis racket. Despite the fact that the clothes looked small enough to fit a toddler, Draco had to admit that Pym did cut a dashing figure. He smiled down at the diminutive elf. "Am I disturbing you?" "No, Master Draco. Pym was only, Draco lifted one eyebrow. "Serving?" Pym had the temerity to smile. "Yes." "If you have a moment, I need a favour." "Of course," the old elf said, with a tiny bow. "You know Creature, the elf at Black House, right? Didn't you once tell me that he was a relation of yours?" Pym grimaced. "Yes. Creature's mother and Pym's grandfather were siblings. Creature is Pym's great-uncle." "Could you pay him a visit? I need to get in touch with his master," Draco said. 10 minutes later, Draco was showered and wrapped in a towel in Granger's bedroom. He was selecting a pair of boxer briefs when a ferocious clatter sounded in the sitting room. He hurried out of the bedroom door, clutching his towel closed at his waist, in time to see a second fireplace, against one wall that wasn't ordinarily there. As he watched, it shrunk back down to the small radiator that always sat in that spot. Standing in front of the shrinking radiator, dusting ash from his trousers, stood Harry Potter. "Potter, how the hell did you get in here? And how did you do that?" he asked in disbelief, staring at the traitor's radiator. "Aura privileges, Malfoy," smirked Potter. "Why didn't you just come with Pym, or perhaps use the regular flue like a normal person?" Draco asked, still stymied. Potter shrugged. "I wasn't sure about your wards, and your flue is closed, so I didn't have an alternative." Draco rolled his eyes. "So what, you just made your own flue connection? Can you even do that? You're not even a year and a half into aura training." Potter gave him a smarmy grin. "I'm on the accelerated path, you know, the chosen one and all." Draco made a noise of disgust. "And of course you couldn't be bothered to apparate nearby and just knock on the door." "All right, fine. I just learned how to do this, and I thought I might try it out. Is that Hermione's room you just came from?" Potter craned his neck to look behind Draco, glimpsing the red bedspread and books stacked on the tiny desk. "Why were you in there wearing only a towel?" "Flatmate privileges, Potter. I keep my underwear in there," Draco said with a braggadocious smirk. Potter's eyebrows joined his lightning scar just beneath his hairline, and Draco revelled in it. "I didn't expect you so quickly. Give me a minute, let me put on some clothes." He summoned a pair of joggers from the sofa and turned back into Granger's bedroom, the smirk still plastered to his face. When he emerged a minute later, now half-dressed, he found Potter staring around at the disgusting pigsty that was the sitting room. "Did this place get ransacked recently? Do you have a list of what's missing?" Potter asked, his lip curling in disgust at the dirty dishes littering every surface. No. This is rather a temporary situation. Ignore it," Draco said, flourishing his wand in the direction of the sofa. Instantly, the scarves and clothes scattered about were neatened into a folded pile. Draco levitated the stack to a club chair, depositing it next to the alert Crookshanks, who watched with interest from his usual perch. Draco gestured for Potter to sit on the now mostly clean sofa. The boy who lived did so, side-eyeing the coffee table piled high with crisp bags and biscuit wrappers and more dirty dishes. With a put-upon sigh, Draco swept the lot into a pile that levitated itself to the rubbish bin, leaving the tabletop fairly clean. "Right, what's this all about, Malfoy? Your elf said you wished to speak to me urgently, alone." Draco nodded, swallowing hard. He was about to divulge information that he was sure Potter would rebuke, but he had no one else to turn to, and so he began. "I've been in touch with the Minister for Magic over the last several months. He, asked a favour of me, and at first I complied, mainly because he intimated that there would be unpleasant consequences if I didn't." Potter frowned in confusion. "What sort of favour would Kingsley Shacklebolt possibly ask from you?" Draco ignored the insinuation. "At first he asked me to keep an eye on Granger, to find out what her plans for the future were, keep tabs on people she associated with." Potter shook his head, confused. "I don't understand. Why wouldn't he just ask her this? Hermione would have been thrilled to talk with Kingsley about her future plans. I think she considers him a mentor of sorts." Draco tilted his head, his silver eyes flashing with a challenge. "But does Shacklebolt consider Granger a protégé?" Potter paused to think before answering. "I don't know. To be honest, I've only had a few conversations with the man myself. Really, he and Hermione seem a lot alike. They're both intelligent, level-headed. They have good instincts for reading people. I naturally assumed that they got along just fine." Draco raised a brow and grimaced. "I don't know what's going on, but suffice to say I don't think Shacklebolt has any plans to take her under his wing any time soon." He explained to Potter the things that the Minister for Magic had either intimated or outright said to him over the course of their handful of meetings. When Draco was finished, Potter looked worried, but not as upset as the Slytherin felt he should be. "I don't know, Malfoy. I can definitely see how some of what he said was a bit odd, but I find it really hard to believe that Kingsley feels threatened by Hermione." Draco shook his head in annoyed disbelief at the other wizard. "Why shouldn't he be threatened, Potter? Granger has more charisma and personality and a single curl on her head than Shacklebolt has ever had. She is by far the smartest person I know. You said so yourself. She reads people very well, and she has great instincts. She's gorgeous. She's extremely well known and popular within the wizarding world. What's not to feel threatened by?" As Draco spoke, Potter's expression changed from thoughtful to amused. "Geez, Malfoy, get a room, why don't you?" "Well, not this one. This room is awful. Is this chocolate or brown sauce?" Potter lifted his elbow from the arm of the sofa, only to discover a gooey puddle under his wrist. The boy who lived appeared to be trying not to retch. "Seriously, Malfoy, what the hell is going on? I realize I've never seen any part of your house except the dungeons and that room we basically destroyed on our way out of there, but this is revolting. Did you always live this way? Didn't you have house elves?" "We did, but people kept freeing them," Draco replied drolly, leaving out the fact that he was typically the person doing the freeing. "What, is this lifestyle unfamiliar to you? You shared quarters with Weasley for years. Doesn't he live like this?" "Like this?" Potter stared around in disbelief, then seemed to consider. "I mean, he's not always the best at cleaning up, I suppose." "Never mind about the mess. What should we do about Shacklebolt?" Draco answered, trying to get them back on track after checking the time. He'd already missed his first class of the day, and he could not afford to fall any further behind in his schedule. It didn't help that he was still exhausted from a lack of sleep. Potter pointed his wand to scourgify first his own sleeve, then the arm of the sofa. He shook his head, lost in thought. "I just don't know, Malfoy. This seems so unlikely, to be honest. No offense, but from the outside looking in, you would be one of the last people that the public would expect to be watching out for Hermione's best interests." The Slytherin's silver eyes flashed up to meet the green ones of his former rival, brief outrage surging in them. Then Draco looked away, chagrined. "I just don't think she deserves this, is all." Potter leaned forwards, with his elbows on his knees, fingers interlaced and head tilted forward to rest on them, considering. "I'll be honest, I'm not placed highly enough in the Aura Corps to even begin to know how to go about proving any of this. You would need something substantial, some real evidence, Malfoy. It can't just be your word against his, because, again, no offense, but—" "Right, I'm aware. My word means nothing compared to his." Draco finished bitterly. Potter did not reply, only tilting his head and offering a terse nod to acknowledge the truth. Draco stood to pace. So how do I get this evidence? It's not as though the man has written me a letter demanding this of me. He's not that stupid. Potter shook his head. I don't know. In old films they would always set up some kind of sting, wear a wire to record the conversation or something. But most Muggle technology doesn't work around magic, unless it's been modified somehow, and I really don't know how to do that. What about a pensieve? I can offer my memories as testimony to the Wizengamot. Draco offered, hopefully. Potter sighed. Memories can be altered. To be honest, even if they weren't, it's likely that Kingsley's defense would say that you simply modified yours. That puts reasonable doubt in the minds of the Wizengamot. Perhaps Polyjuice. Draco looked at the other wizard as though he'd gone mad. How, in the name of Merlin, would Polyjuice help us here, Potter? Never mind. Suffice to say, though, I've tried that in the past with, mixed results. The Gryffindor chuckled, raising Draco's suspicions. This sounded like a tale, to be certain, but now was not the time. Well, let me know if you come up with something, Draco said with a sigh. He paused, then spoke with forced nonchalance. So, Granger says that she and the weasel broke up. Potter looked uncomfortable. Yes, I don't really know the details, but I think that's over. For now, he added quickly. A sudden thought occurred to Draco. You don't think it was because of his absolute pig-like slovenliness, do you? He asked, a note of worry creeping unbidden into his voice. No, I don't think... Potter scoffed, then broke off, looking around the room with fresh eyes. Is that what this is all about, Malfoy? Are you trying to make yourself more like Ron so that she likes you? That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard you come up with, Potter, and I know for a fact that you once brought a literal dragon into Hogwarts Castle. Draco scoffed, busying himself with straightening a pile of notes on the desk in the corner. Potter raised an eyebrow. Well, you just told me that you think our current leader, who fought Voldemort alongside me, is actually a blood purist trying to marginalize my best friend. Forgive me if I'm questioning your judgment. Draco grimaced. You can choose to believe it or not, Potter, but I'm telling you, Shacklebolt is trying to derail Granger before she can get a look in. He knows she's going to be formidable, a powerful force one day. The other wizard shook his head. I'm not saying I'm dismissing your concerns entirely. I'm just saying both of us need to be careful before we go around spouting off accusations without proof. Draco nodded as Potter stood up to go. Thanks for coming to speak with me. Send your elf if you think of anything, and I'll do the same. I'll probably just owl or wait to hear from you. If Hermione catches sight of Creature, it'll just piss her off. She insists that I free him, but he's threatened to off himself if I do it. Potter sighed. And Malfoy, listen, I don't know exactly what's going on between you and Hermione. Precisely nothing, Draco interrupted gruffly. Right, Potter said, eyeing him speculatively. Regardless, whatever it is, I've got to tell you, the way to go about things is not this. He gestured around at the copious amounts of rubbish and mess. Hermione liked Ron years ago because he was genuine and brave and kind, not because he was whatever the hell this is. Draco huffed a humorless laugh. Well, then, it's a good thing I'm not trying to woo her, because I doubt she would ever see me as any of those things. Potter tilted his head back and forth as though weighing the options. If you had asked me a few years ago, I would have agreed, 100%. But Malfoy, you did try to help us, that night we were captured and brought to your house, and you lowered your wand against Dumbledore. Draco gave him a droll look. And if I had known that doing those things was going to lead to this heartfelt conversation, I might not have. The other wizard rolled his eyes. Regardless, you really do seem to be trying to look out for her now, if this is all true. That's got to stand for something. I'm just letting you know, Pratt. Hermione isn't one for games. If you're trying to date her, I'm not," he retorted, unable to meet Potter's eye. Potter nodded. "Right, but if you were, just be straightforward with her." After a beat to consider the other wizard's words, Draco returned the eye roll with interest. "Potter, no offense, but I watched you dance precisely one dance at the Yule Ball years ago, and then sit in the corner and sulk for 3 hours. My apologies, but I'm not coming to you for your wise words about wooing witches. It's your law enforcement expertise I'm looking for. Keep your advice." "Whatever, tosser." Potter grinned in spite of himself. "Just don't say I didn't warn you." With a quick crack and a swirl of air that stirred up the crisp bags on the floor, Potter disapparated. Draco stared at the neat pile of clothing stacked up on the nearby chair, next to the now disinterested cat. The pair of them made eye contact. Draco blinked first. "What if Potter's right?" he asked the beast. "What if she's not looking for a replica of Weasley? Could she possibly be happy with me as I am?" The orange psychopath merely blinked as if to say, "You already know the answer." Draco sighed as his mind rifled through a compendium of the interactions he'd had with this witch over the last 8 or 9 years of their lives. The name-calling, the scorn, the hexes, the open-faced slap to his cheek that had stung his pride far more than it had his face. No, Hermione Granger would not have any interest in being with him the way he'd always been. And in his heart of hearts he knew that whilst he might have changed some, it wasn't nearly enough. The fact that Shacklebolt came specifically to him and not Theo to go around behind Granger's back, knowing what kind of man he was. He was still Draco Malfoy, and he felt certain that that was nothing like what Granger wanted. With a heavy sigh, he flicked his wand at the stack of clothing, tossing it in shambles back onto the sofa. The items from the rubbish bin flew back onto the coffee table. This was the only plan he had, and it would have to work. "Draco, did you need a copy of the notes for private law from this morning? I can duplicate mine, if you'd like." He inhaled her lovely gardenia scent deeply, bolstered by her words. It was evening now, and though he had made it to the rest of the classes that day, missing private law this morning would have set him back mightily without her assistance. Thanks, Hermione," he said. With a tiny smile, she tapped the pages in her muggle notebook, then handed him the copies. "It's no problem. They're quite detailed. I sat next to Jason, and he shared his notes with me. He's very intelligent, very thorough." The urge to incendiate the pages immediately was hard for Draco to ignore. "Who's Jason?" he asked, aiming and falling short of a light-hearted tone. He's in a few of our classes. I've seen him around campus, here and there. He sat next to me today, and he offered to share his notes," Granger said, also coming up quite short on the nonchalance scale. Draco's hackles immediately stood at attention. "Where did you meet him?" he asked with far more urgency than the question warranted. She turned a look of suspicious surprise on him. "What's it to you, Draco?" He blinked a few times, then tried for a smile. You're right. My apologies, Hermione." Her face seemed to tighten before it relaxed, and returned his faltering smile. "He goes to my gym as well, but I actually met him at the advisor's office, funnily enough. Evidently, we're somewhat on the same workout schedule, because I see him at the gym quite often." Heat flooded Draco's face, as he now had an image to go with the name. Jason. Short exercise trousers, muggle trainers, heavy weights, and an appreciation for the stares that he was drawing from the women in the gym. Draco already detested this man before this conversation, but now he felt that they might be at war. To Granger he simply said, "How lovely." in a voice that sounded anything but. She would not meet his eye, but smiled nonetheless. "Yes, it's helpful to have such a prodigious note-taker in that class. It's one of our Muggle classes, you know, so I'm not able to use my quick quotes quill." Draco only hummed in non-committal agreement, then stopped short, his thoughts suddenly dueling rapidly in his brain. "Granger!" She looked up at him, startled. "What's wrong?" But he only shook his head, schooling his features to contain his excitement. "It's nothing." The wee hours of Saturday morning, October 30th, 1990. Sometime around 2 o'clock in the morning, he had finished working out the details, and his letter to Potter was written. His plan was simple. He would set up a day and time for Shacklebolt to return to the flat, and then he would lure the minister into a discussion, outlining everything Shacklebolt had asked of him concerning Granger. He would enlist Potter to hide in Granger's room with the quick quotes quill and a pair of extendable ears. They would need to ask Theo for help in keeping Granger out of the flat for the duration of the meeting, something Draco was loath to facilitate. But it could not be avoided. If either of the two of them were around, he had no doubt that Shacklebolt would say nothing incriminating. It would have to be well planned and orchestrated. If Shacklebolt knew that Potter was in the flat recording everything that was said, the whole operation would go to shit, and Draco would likely face charges of extortion. But if it worked, he would be free of this burden of spying on Granger, free from feeling as though he was actively working against her and conspiring with those that did not want her in the wizarding world. In the semi-darkness of the sitting room, lit only by the single Muggle desk lamp, Draco looked at Granger's door. It was the middle of the night. He could not exactly call Pym here into the sitting room where he slept. Granger was a light sleeper, and would undoubtedly hear even the tiny crack of elfin apparition. Draco hurried into the little toilet, casting a muffliato spell. Pym. The scant pop of noise sounded like a firecracker, in the still quiet to Draco's ears. "Yes, Master Draco?" "Oh, that was so loud!" Draco said in nervous anguish. He stood entirely still for several seconds, listening at the door for the sound of footsteps. None came, so he breathed normally again. "I need you to take this letter to Harry Potter," Draco began, holding out the letter. With a quick nod, the elf snatched it from his hands and popped away with another swift crack. "Fuck!" Draco seethed in a whisper. He had planned to tell the elf to leave the letter in a place where Potter would find it in the morning. With Draco's bad luck, Pym would awaken the Chosen One in the middle of the night to hand-deliver this missive, as though it was urgent. Draco leaned against the sink, raking his fingers through his hair. He fully expected an angry howler to arrive at dawn. Instead, the sound of a much louder crack broke the silence, only 30 seconds later. Potter was now standing in his aura uniform, in Draco's minuscule shower. "What are you doing here, Potter?" Draco somehow both whispered and shouted. "Did you even read my letter?" Potter rolled his eyes. "Calm down, Malfoy. I skimmed it. I don't have much time to spare, though I'm covering the night shift, and I need to be at work in 15 minutes, so I thought it would just be easier to come here and talk face to face." Potter made as though to exit the shower, but Draco put up a hand to stop him. "Just stay standing in there. There's no room in this tiny toilet for 2 people to be in here otherwise." "You aren't kidding." Potter gave a low whistle as he looked around at the copious lotions, potions, gels, and atomizers. Merlin's ass. Who uses all these products? I've been in Hermione's washroom. She never had half of all these things. Draco tamped down the quick flare of jealousy at the reminder that Granger had willingly chosen this wizard as her housemate. "Sod off, Potter," he said, straining to ignore Potter's muttered comment about Poncy Gits. For his part, Potter struggled to ignore the mess in the room, particularly when his elbow knocked over a small cache of bottles onto the floor. Draco rolled his eyes in annoyance, levitating them back into place as Potter shifted out of the way with much consternation. "Are you done destroying my washroom?" Can we discuss my ideas now?" "Please," groaned Potter, struggling to stand upright in the crowded shower. In hushed tones, he outlined his plan in slightly more detail to Potter. At first, the wizard looked skeptical, but as Draco went on, he seemed more and more on board. I think this might work. Let me think about what fully qualified aura might come with me to be a second witness. Roger Davies is a good bloke," Potter said in a low whisper. Draco nodded. "All right. I'll aim to get Shacklebolt here in the next week or so, and you—" But he wasn't able to finish the sentence. There was a soft knock on the door, and silently Draco cursed to himself. His muffliato had worn off. Had Theo heard voices coming from the tiny toilet, he would have burst in without announcing himself, just to be a nuisance. This could only be one person. One moment, please," he called frantically. His silver eyes were wide in fear as they made meaningful contact with Potter's. The Gryffindor began a frenzied pantomime of something about which Draco was entirely ignorant. "What?" he mouthed in panicked annoyance. From outside the door came Granger's muffled voice. "Draco?" "I'm going to disapparate," Potter mouthed back, green eyes huge behind his dirty spectacles, as he twirled his fingers in a circle to indicate the twist of apparition. "No, my muffling charm's worn off. She'll hear it," Draco cried as quietly as he could. "You think it's better if she finds us in here together?" Potter looked at him as though he'd lost his mind. Draco's mind was moving 1,000 different directions at once. Granger was a smart witch, and she would feel the muffliato fall into place if she was right outside the door. What would she think if she heard someone disapparating? "Draco, I'm going back to my room. I apologize for disturbing you and your... again, my apologies." There was the light sound of retreating footsteps, and Draco thumped his head against the door. What had she thought was going on in here? Behind him, Potter was even more agitated. He drew his wand from his sleeve of his aura robes. "I've got to go. Muffliato." The wet blanket sensation fell heavily over the two of them. "I'll be in touch," Potter said, spinning in place inside the tiny shower, and disappearing in an echoing, swirling crack of red robes. Draco sighed, alone in the tiny washroom. He opened the door silently and stepped back out into the sitting room. After a moment's hesitation, he crossed to her closed bedroom door. He gave a soft knock. "The door's unlocked," she called quietly. She was sitting up in bed, reading, or perhaps just pretending to read, by the low lamplight. She looked up at him with one eyebrow raised. The flat-faced cat next to her did the same. The muggle lamp cast a warm circle around her, and with her chaotic curls and pink cheeks, she looked beautiful. "I'm done in the toilet if you need to go in," he offered. She gave him a tight smile and placed her book on the bedside table. Throwing back the bed covers, she swung her bare legs out, slipping on a pair of fuzzy booties. She scurried past him without making eye contact, and Draco caught the familiar current of gardenia fragrance as she passed. 2 minutes later, Hermione emerged to find him resettled on the sofa. She stood in the doorway of the toilet, in her short sleeping trousers and odd muggle t-shirt that depicted 4 men walking a muggle street, all sporting atrocious haircuts. She cleared her throat. About earlier, my apologies, Draco. I know it's difficult for you to date properly, not having proper privacy, with the sitting room as your bedroom and everything." "No, it's nothing like that," he began. "Listen," she stopped him. "If you wish to, entertain sometimes during the day, I'm sure that Theo and I can go—" "No, Granger!" He took a deep breath, horrified. "Hermione, I mean. There's really no need. If it's all right with you, I'd rather not discuss this again." She stood there for a moment, not knowing what else to say. Finally, she nodded and turned off the light in the toilet. Crossing back to her bedroom door, she closed it quietly. He withdrew the pillow from behind his head and covered his face with it, letting out a low, groaning yell. Ugh, bollocks. Now she thought he was bringing other women for clandestine trysts in the toilet, like some disgusting, sex-starved washroom Lothario. He was going to have to face her in the full light of morning, he knew. Hopefully before then, his mortification would allow him to die in his sleep with dignity. Thank you for listening to Who Gives a Fuck About an Oxford Comma by Great 78. If you enjoyed the story and would like to listen to more, please follow me on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts by searching for Silver and Copper. Or you can find me under Great 78 on Archive of Our Own.